Hi, folks. We're Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures. Listen to this essay driving along in your car or in the train live stream. Now, in this essay, I'd like to talk about something that's repeated pretty much universally around the media commentariat, which is, and the business economics commentariat, is that economic growth can only occur if there's population growth. So there's these dire warnings about countries that, such as South Korea and Japan, for example, that are where more people are dying than are being born, and that there's going to be some economic Armageddon's going to be visited upon them because of because of this population decline. Now, is this really true? I mean, is this even accurate? There's a lot of hysterical sort of claims about it, gushing commentary that population, even population stagnation, let alone decline, means economic oblivion for those countries. Well, then the opposite will be true. Countries that have huge populations would be booming economically. They'd be economic paradises. Milk and honey and gold would just rain upon them because of their massive populations. So that must be true. If it's true on one side that decline means economic oblivion, then it must be when populations are vast and increasing that economic bounty, unspeakable levels of economic bounty must be occurring. Hold, stop. That's not happening. In fact, the countries of the world that have got the fastest population growth, or places and regions of the world that have the fastest population growth, and have the youngest, as in the average age of the youngest populations, they're basket case, impoverished, dirt poor basket cases. So how can the two propositions coexist here? A plentiful population and a young plentiful population in no way translates into riches or guaranteed riches or even high probability levels of riches. The opposite is the case and has been proved to be so for many hundreds of years. So does population decline therefore mean economic oblivion? Well, also no is the answer to that. So let's just have a look at a few of the nuances in what is population, what is an ideal population, if indeed such a number even exists, but how economies can prosper with small populations or large populations, depending on the structural nature of the economy. So let's have a look at that. I also want to talk about oversupply of people. For example, if there's a share on the stock market, a company's on the stock market. Now, the real value of their shares is, for example, $1 a share. That's the intrinsic real value of the wealth of that company. But because of frantic, hysterical buying by the BlackRocks and the State Streets of the world, the share price is at $100 a share. So way above the intrinsic value of the stock. But when the stock price drops from 100, that's been overbought to 100, when it drops to $90, look at that, 10% drop, billions have been wiped off the value. Oh, Armageddon, apocalypse. But no, the price of the stock is so overpriced, so wildly overpriced that it needs to come back down to a sensible level that represents the intrinsic value. And the same occurs with populations. Not in exactly the same way, but that same conceptual framework needs to be looked at when you consider populations. Now, what is an optimal population? Well, again, it depends on the efficiency of the economy. When you look at the economy of Switzerland, the population of Switzerland is quite small, but it's a very rich country per capita. If you look at the population of Norway, that's 4 million or something, but that's quite a wealthy country. And if you look at the various populations of countries around the world, they're not necessarily need large numbers of people or huge and growing populations to be prosperous. For example, the Japanese population, I think it peaked at 130 something million. Now, at the time, they needed a lot of workers because they were rapidly industrializing, and they were really one of the big exporting countries in the world, exporting everything from motor vehicles, computers, musical instruments, electronics, and so on. So there's vast, and they need a lot of workers to do that at a factory level, administrative level, and so on. But the Japanese invested heavily in robots and robotization and mechanization and automation and this sort of thing. So their need for a large population in a high growth, high industrializing growth phase, their need for a high population has passed. So the population of Japan could easily drop to 30, 40, even 50 million below its absolute maximum point. But because of these many efficiencies that have been put in, again, the automation and the robotization, and that's moving forward in leaps and bounds, artificial intelligence and so on, then the natural level of population level for a place like Japan, maybe 80 million, 75, 80 million, and maybe even a little bit less than that. But again, does that mean economic Armageddon? Now, if we look at a purely sort of worker consumer society, the theory is that the more workers you have, thus the more consumers you have, therefore wealth is growing, and so on. And that's to some extent to be. I mean, yes, you can agree with that just on the face. We're looking at a simplistic sort of level, but you get to a point where the amount of people in the economy relative to the new wealth being generated and the efficiency, very important, the efficiency contained, as in efficiency opposed to wastage, contained within that growth, can be that you reach a maximum level of inefficiency and wastage, which means you don't really have economic growth. You just have you're just churning money back and forth rather than growing in an economy. So really, the number of people is the population, and the population growth is very much tied to efficiency, and in the case of an advanced industrial economy, the level of automation and so on. So we really need to put all these factors together to consider this. So my point is, population growth is not needed. If you look at it very simplistic, as say a junior high school commerce class, where the more people who work and consume, the more economic activity you have, then I get that. But it assumes a blank starting point. It's not the starting point of an already industrialized economy. Now, the large populations and growing populations in places like India, which is desperate to get rid of hundreds of millions of people as quickly as it can, and wants to push them all over the West. And if you look at all government trade deals with India, top of the Indian government's list is just take millions of people away from India and put them in your rich white Western countries. And if you look at Africa, where the populations are exploding, and other parts of the Pakistans and Afghanistan and this sort of thing, these are dirt poor basket case economies. And the more people are added, then the poorer they become, not richer. And the rate at which the population grows is several times the rate at which the economy can grow. No matter how much free or cheap labor they have, the economy doesn't really move forward. It for the most part is moving backwards, even below the bottom baseline point. So clearly population's got nothing to do with it. And so economic organization is really central, which is part of the reason why the globalists are desperate to move, rather than industrialize and improve the economies of the basket cases of the world. The globalists want to move the cheap peasant labor from the third world to the first world, under the very mistaken belief, in my view, that it somehow will create greater economic mass. But that mass is being, for whatever extent it does increase, is being bought at the expense of severe per capita degradation of wealth. Although the globalists have quarantined off their own wealth, so that wealth continues. The essentials of life, the power, water, and all this, and they're all globalist controlled. So they make disproportionately low risk, high profits, whereas everyone else goes backwards economically. But we need to come back again to the industrialization side. Now, given that there are many prognostications that a lot of the jobs that exist today won't be needed in artificial intelligence, robots and that sort of thing. For example, there are many jobs in aged care, senior citizen retirement care that robots could do. Now, whether or not that proves to work out as well as some suggest, that remains to be seen. But could those robots be any worse than the illiterate third world peasants that can't speak your language anyway and have got flaky, corrupt, supposed credentials in nursing or aged care? So that's would it be a step backwards if robots were doing it? So robots could replace a lot of those. If you look at a vast amount of the jobs that have been created that I call equity, affirmative action equity jobs, such as diversity directors, HR directors, and entire HR departments, that they're all stacked with people who are activists. They're not stacked with workers. They're stacked with activists that attend these pretend play in the sandpit meetings all day, and they don't actually have a real job. They produce, create, and build nothing. In fact, their main aim seems to tear things down. Much of the public service as well. The huge expansion in the public service. The amount of public service jobs that are created just to absorb Indian immigrants into Australia is absolutely chronic. Entire public service departments now are all wall-to-wall Indians. There's nothing organic about that, for goodness sake. So a lot of these jobs aren't needed and don't exist. So at some point, there's going to be a reckoning of why do we have, we don't even need the jobs aren't even needed. They're invented. In the case of universal basic income, which would be the transitioning phase, then why do you need large populations? Now, in the case of universal basic income, the idea is that everyone who lives in a region is still going to need accommodation and food and water and so on, and energy and transport, and all these things will be owned on a monopoly basis by the globalist cabal. So they can, if you like, impose and force consumerism, but smaller pieces of the consumer pie, because no one's got a lot of money anymore, smaller pieces of the consumer pie. So to protect their interests, they want a large population mass, all consuming smaller bits than was hitherto the case on a per unit or per capita basis. But in overall mass terms, the globalists will be protecting their profits and their slice of the action. That's obviously on the cards. And so when you look at the profit structure of the future of commerce in the West, that could very well be where they're heading with this. But on the basis of his population growth, assuming an efficient, well-run, consumer capitalist economy, which I think we're going to lose in the decades to come. It's already been lost. Much of the economy now is all centrally planned by governments, globalist controlled governments in collusion with the BlackRocks of the world and so on. So I don't think population growth is necessary. If you're looking at a new phase of industrialization where vast numbers of workers are needed, then sure, but those would already be high technology economies anyway, such as the early industrialization of Britain and so on. Britain had an edge, I think, in a lot of ways when they industrialized, because the population of Britain was actually quite small. Their population of 10 million or so when they were the serious industrialization thing kicked off, maybe a little bit more than 10, but not much more. So because of the small population and because of the trading empire they had, moving from the mercantile empire into the industrial empire, then Britain's focus on labour-saving devices, whether it be the steam engine or the spinning jenny or the steam-powered pump or whatever it might be, the labour-saving devices that they invented, they're very much pitched at the population shortage. So as we don't have a lot of labour sitting around, particularly labour capable of operating machines, we need to create a new category of labour-saving device, so we're not dependent on the number of workers around. You saw the same thing actually in the early industrialisation of the United States, and again another huge spurt after the after the Civil War into the 1860s. If you look at the amount of labour saving and technical innovations during that time, they were quite considerable and reflected the industrialisation, the population spread, and so on of the day. But those times have changed. Every advanced industrialised economy is now there. The economies that are industrialising from the mid-level, places like, I don't know, Poland or Czech Republic, those sort of things, they don't have anywhere near the mass or the possibility of producing consumer goods that are going to be exported elsewhere. And in the basket case places like the Indian subcontinent and most of Africa, Afghanistan, that sort of thing, then they've got no opportunity or no chance or not opportunity, no capability of industrialising along those lines. Nor because of some of their religious practices would they want to, I would think. But anyway, that's it. So this idea of population growth is part of, or must be, an essential part of economic growth, and loss of population means economic apocalypse. I do not accept that. I think that's bullshit. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.